Welcome back to the Central Arizona VITA Network's presentation of the 2021 VITA training. Gene will now continue on with the second segment of session 1.
So we're going to go to the Link and Learn certification site. This is the key for what we need to do. The document that Jim has got uploaded and shared with you in the chat is similar to this one. I'm lazy. I didn't, put a new screen in. So this is 2017 and 18 for the West Valley VITA, but it has the same information. We want you to write down your login and your password for these two sites. You're going to need them. And the thing is, you might use them all this year. And then come April 15th, you're going to kind of forget what happened up until then. And by next November or December, when you have to start looking at your certification test again, you're going to go, what was my login? I don't remember my password. If you have a piece of paper with it written down, I even advise people, sometimes I write the stuff in my 4012. There are pages in your 4012 that are pages for notes. And so behind one of the tabs, I put my password and login in it so that it's with me. And then I've gotten to the point where I now carry my phone with me and I have a note section in there. And so I keep my passwords in there as well. You might have an app that says it's like a password manager. Put it in there so that you have it with you. It's nothing more frustrating than to go to a site and ready to be volunteering and ready to help people and not be able to get into the computer. So at VITA, Link Learn Certification, it's www.linklearncertification.com. That's the one web address you probably really need, www.linklearncertification. That's all one word, .com. This is the screen that pops up. This site is run by the IRS. And on the left-hand side, you have the certification test. Log in and name and password, log into your IRS account, set up a new IRS account. That's where we're going to do one set of things. But on the other side, on the right-hand side, you have Link and Learn tax lessons at the top of those quick links. Everything in the 4491 publication 4491, the book version, that's all found in the Link and Learn tax lessons. You can go click on that link and do the stuff online. And it takes time and there's a lot of things to navigate through, but it's all there. And then the practice lab link has been circled for you because that's a quick and easy way to get to the practice lab in TaxSlayer. But TaxSlayer is not run by the IRS. They're under contract to the IRS. And so you have to have a different password to get into the practice lab. So this is why we have two passwords. And the reason we say there's a third password, because when you go to your actual volunteer site and want to get into the real production of tax returns in TaxSlayer, you're going to have another password. So you're going to have three. But you're not going to know that third one until you get to the site. So today we're going to focus on Link Learn and getting an account set up, and then the practice lab and getting an account set up. If you've clicked on the create account down there in the bottom left corner that was circled where it says create account, you only have to do this the first time that you go in to create the account. Then this is where you self-register. And the group defaults to 01, you're a VITA volunteer. The second question is, do you want to take the site coordinator course? Well, no, we don't want to take the site coordinator course. We don't want to be a site coordinator. Our training source was Link and Learn Taxes, e-learning, and then you're going to put in your first and last name. And remember, it's got to match your driver's license, your photo ID, because that will be checked when you get to your site. You leave the SEID blank, then you create a login, password, confirm password. So your login could be a different username than your first and last name. Then your password, then you confirm it again. And then you put in your email address again. so that that information is there in your account. Now, you can come back and fix this account other times if you remember your password. And at the bottom of the screen, you'll put in your address, your state and province, your time zone, the years you volunteered. Now, if you're a professional and a professional tax preparer, those last two blocks you would fill in. But for us volunteers, we just leave those blank. And then you click on the button to register at the bottom of the page. And you now have an account with Link and Learn. In Link and Learn, if you've logged in and you have on the left-hand side gone in to take a test, then you want to make sure that you first off, you click on the tabs up here at the top: basic, advanced, military. So we want you to click on advanced so that that tab is showing. And then
I might point out too, because I forgot to replace this screen. I didn't think it was different, but I might point out that you see across those tabs, there's basic, advanced, military. There's another one that says circular 230. You want to be on the advanced tab. That's going to, make sure you navigate to the right tab.
Right. So here are the tests that show up, the volunteer standards of test conduct. Now they'll say 2021. This is an old slide. And then I intake and interview and quality review exam. And I took the site coordinator training when I was doing this, so that showed up. And then the advanced exam. This health savings account exam, it's not there anymore. Guess where they put health savings? There's so many people with health savings accounts that that's one of the items they've added to the advanced exam. So you won't even see this. It'll just be volunteer standards, intake, and advanced exam will show up. And what you'll do is you'll just click on the exam if that's the one you're going to take. When that happens, you get this little launch window that tells you about the volunteer standards of conduct, the course information, and then you have to click the button launch in order to actually start the test. And when you click on launch, it then brings up a screen like this one, gives you some information, and then you can click the Start Assessment button in order to start the exam. So first off, you have a question. You have to read the question prior to working. Oh, I've covered this thing already. I told you, notice how similar this is to, actually, it's exactly like the publication 6744 for 2021. Prior to working at all VITA TCE sites, you have to annually pass the volunteer standards, you sign in date, you pass the advanced tax law certification, all of the above, or A and B. Well, we've covered that. So I marked the answer in the little radio bullets on the left-hand side. But then you have to click next in order to go on to the next question. You have the option to skip if you wish, and then go on and not answer this. But then when you get to the end of the 10th question, you will get a prompt that says, do you want to go back and answer the question that you skipped? So the software will help you answer all 10 questions. Well, they'll make sure you answer the 10 questions. They're not going to help you answer it correctly. Once you've taken the test, you get to review your answers. And they'll split it up. They'll give you the question on the left-hand side and the answer that you put in on the right-hand side. So you can kind of check all the answers that you put down. Do they make sense, etc.? Oh, I forgot to, I marked one of them incorrectly. I put it false and I meant true. Sometimes my hands are dyslexic and I don't realize it. But finally, when you're ready to take the test, you click the submit button in the bottom left corner. And as soon as you do that, you get a response. And it will show you the questions. Well, here's the 10 questions for the test. Notice that they are all marked correct. They could have been marked incorrect. At the bottom left-hand corner, it will tell you the assessment statistics. And then the software says you're done. So all you have to do is click exit the course in the upper left-hand corner, and you're done with the test. Any questions on how to take the test on Link and Learn? Well, if we were in a class and we were sitting face to face, I would go ahead and we would all take the test right now so that we'd all have the same shared experience. But it's something that you can do this evening on your own. All right, next up is the TaxSlayer Practice Lab. Now, remember, you can always use this web address, vita.taxslayerpro.com/IRS training/EN/account/access. That takes a long time to type. Or just use my Link Learn certification website. You click on the link for the practice lab. Either one, they'll both take you to the practice lab. And that's where we're headed. So there's that link for the practice lab. Your Link and Learn username and password will not work in the practice lab. So we got to have another password. So the first screen you get to, the password is kind of a generic screen. It's to get into practice lab. Everybody who wants to get into practice lab has to type this one in, Train Pro Web in all caps. Train Pro Web. And then you're going to click the Create Account button to set up your new IRS account with Practice Lab. And if they've got an asterisk, that's the required field. Let's see, here we go. So the first screen you see will be on the left. This is the general screen. Access Link and Learn Taxes. Hello, welcome to the Electronic Tax Software Practice Lab. And down at the bottom, you're going to type Train Pro Web in capital letters and then click the login button. That's going to open up the second screen, which is on the right. And that's where you are going to have your own personal login to Practice Lab, your own username and password. In order to get that, the first time you do this, you will have to click on Create an Account. And when you click on Create an Account, it brings up a screen where you're going to put in your email address. They're going to put in your username that you're going to use and the password you're going to use. Their program type, VITA. You're going to skip the part about the site identification number. And then there's going to be at the bottom a password recovery, like a security question. And you're going to put that in. And then you're going to click Create Account. And at that point, you can then get into the practice lab. So it actually, when you finish with this and you click Create Account, it takes you back to the screen on the right so that you can then sign in with your personal username and password. So when you sign in with your personal username and password, this is the screen that you will see, Practice Lab Home. And for most of us, we start by simply clicking on Go to Practice Area. But I want to point out, and I'll do it later when we do it live, that down below, there are 6 sections of information. 1, 2, and 3, and 4 have videos so that you can click on one of the videos and it will stream to your computer and you can watch a 5 to 10 minute video about that particular topic. So once you've clicked on Go to the Practice Lab, we get to this page. And you can either start a new tax return or there's a function called Client Search. Once you have created a client and started a tax return, if you save and exit from that tax return or complete that tax return is then stored in Client Search. So if you, let's say you were doing Abby's return and the phone rings and you save and exit and you go take care of the phone call and someone's at the door and then you decide to go out for lunch and you come back later, you don't need to start over with a new return. You go to the Client Search button, click on Client Search, and it'll bring up the return you were working on that you had saved and exited from. We'll show you that as we go along. So that's getting set up in TaxSlayer Pro Practice Lab. Here's a screen that I think this will take us to where I wanted to show you. The practice area, that's where you click to start. But notice that there's sections 4, 5, and 6 at the bottom of the screen. So down here, you get information about preparing a return. So this is what it looks like. These are a PDF that says, here are the documents and the interview notes, just like in the 6744 publication that we use for the test. And so you can go then, you take a look at those documents, print them out, it's a PDF, and then go into the practice lab, create the return, come back to the tab here, click on the other document, and it's a PDF, and it's here's our answers. So you can compare what you have with what they came up with. So these are 7 returns that you can practice on. Well, in the practice lab, again, I should say up here, notice there, this says rejected clients. In the real lab, when you're really doing for real tax returns, if you have a rejected client, it will show on the site coordinator's site and sometimes on the quality reviewer's site, depending on how they set up the security. But that's a red lit firecracker that here's something we need to fix right away. Then over here in the message center, you get messages from VITA, from TaxSlayer, and here's 454 messages. Well, when I took this screenshot, I hadn't answered any messages since April 15th. And here we are back in October and November when I was preparing this program, and I didn't clear out all my messages. Now, some of the messages are really stupid, like, we're going to be closed on Friday for a staff meeting. Or we're taking off Christmas Day and Christmas Eve, and there won't be any support. So some of that you can delete. Some of it has to deal with Missouri taxes or Illinois taxes, that they're working on some particular problem. But it's always a good way when you show up at your site, if there's anything new that TaxSlayer has sent out, there'll be a message waiting for you when you log in. And that's a way to check on them. All right, starting a new 2021 tax return, click here to start the new return. You click on the select button and this screen appears. And you always start with the Social Security number. You have to enter it twice. It has to match both times. It's the software. Sometimes my dyslexic fingers will type the second one incorrectly and it won't let me go any further. There are taxpayer profiles below that have that I don't use. Your site might set those up. It's done by a site coordinator. But at the bottom, it says start return. So all I do is put in a Social Security number twice and hit start return. First screen up is what's your filing status. We'll go over this again in more detail when we talk about the differences between filing status. Then after we've marked one of these with a click in one of the boxes, we come over and we click on the continue button. Every time you click on continue, the software saves the return and calculates the return. So even if there's a power outage, the last screen you clicked on continue, it'll still be there in the system when you get back into your server. After the filing status, you get personal information. Here's your first name, your middle initial, your last name. The Social Security number is already there. Then we have date of birth, drop-down menus, and occupation, and then some check boxes, and it goes on down the page. So you can continue this, but notice over here on this side, basic information, filing status, personal information, dependents, qualifying person. So when you go from filing status, you're going to go to personal information, you're going to go to dependents next after you click continue. Let's say you decide you want to change their filing status. You can always come back here and click on filing status, and it will take you right back to that page that was for filing status. So we'll scroll down. We'll continue to see some more check boxes. We get a couple more check boxes, and then you put in your client's address, the apartment number, and the zip code. The nice thing is when the zip code goes in, TaxSlayer automatically fills in the city and town and state, because everything has been preloaded for the zip code. So it saves you a little bit of typing time. Apartment zip codes, the resident, and then daytime phone number, secondary phone number. That's important, people. There is a spot for a phone number. Every once in a while, I get a client who says, I don't want to give out a phone number. The IRS is not going to phone you. The IRS is going to mail you a letter. But if we're trying to deal with a reject, we want to be able to call you and say, as a client, your return was rejected. We need to deal with that really quick. Can you call me back? Or, can I provide you with some ID so that you understand who you're talking with? But that daytime telephone number, I would say every year, one of the sites I work at, we do between 300 and 400 returns in 10 weeks. And out of those, we probably have 4 or 5 rejects. Every time, that daytime telephone number was where we were able to contact the client. So we really stress that.
And Gene, I'd kind of like to point out to everybody, see those little red asterisks next to the fields like city, town, and post office and daytime telephone number? Those are required fields. And if you don't put anything in there and you hit continue, it's going to go, you got to fill this in.
Good point. The software will give you the red box of death, as I like to call it. It'll highlight it and say, this is something that we still need, or it says that this is something that's incorrect for this box. Like I type a letter in for a box that's supposed to have a number. But then at the bottom of this screen, the 2 things I want to point out are, if you click continue, that will save the file return and move you on to the next screen in the software. But if, for instance, you need to quit and go do something else, there's the save and exit return. And when you click on save and exit, it saves the return and closes it so that you can always come back to it later. And that's a key point. That really helps, especially when I'm doing a return at home and I'm getting tired, or I want to go for a walk, or something else happens. Save and exit. It's in the left menu, and that menu will disappear. It will, I guess I'd say, is it slides back to the left. And if you want to get to it, you just put your cursor over it and it will reappear. It'll slide from the left into the right so that it appears like you see it here. But that save and exit is an important item. And when you save and exit, then it takes you back to the welcome to the practice lab. And up at the top is your logout. And that's when you've actually logged out of the practice lab. I would also point out that up here is a change tax year. We'll cover that later on, but it's possible that you might want to do a tax return in last year's tax year. So you could change it from 2021 to 2020. The only reason I point that out is that in December, TaxSlayer is busy updating all of its forms. Right now, the company is making sure that all the federal forms are fixed. There is no way you're going to be able to do an Arizona return right now in December, unless you change the tax year to last year, because last year's tax records, tax information with Arizona in it is still there. We'll get to that again as we get into some of the Arizona peculiarities. So after we've covered filing status, personal information, here's the menu. So we've done filing status. Notice over here, we've entered that information. So instead of begin, it now says edit. Then the personal information we've put in, and so it now says edit. So if I wanted to go back to it, I could click on edit and it would take me back to that personal information screen. Now, dependents and qualifying persons next, if I click on begin, it will take me there. There is this year and last year, they put recovery rebate credit in this basic information page. And I circled it just to make sure that people were aware that it was something that was available there. And at this point, I'm not sure it's going to be there when they get the federal returns done. It might be there. It might not. Here is one of the keys that we want to stress. Name and social security number can cause a reject if they don't match what's in the IRS. So if you put in a social security number for Rebecca Jones, but you typed in Becky Jones because that's what was on her intake form, the IRS computer is going to reject her return because it doesn't recognize Becky, it recognizes Rebecca Jones. So we always want to make sure that the name and social security number that we see from the client is what we enter into the software. And there's a whole page in your 4012 that deals with how to deal with names, first names, last names, middle names, extended names, etc. We'll cover some of that later on. Once you've completed up here the basic information and the federal section and the health insurance questions, you get to the state section. And then after the state section, you get to summary print and then to Efile. And when you get to the Efile section, that's where you can actually mark out that you're finished with the form. You don't really have to deal with amended returns. As a matter of fact, I think most of our partners, along with the city of Phoenix, say during the tax filing season, we do not do amended returns. We expect you to come back during the summer to deal with that. But that depends on which partner you're dealing with. So this screen pops up once you finish the first three sections. Now you're at the state section and you can click on add a state return. Then you have a choice. You can either actually come over here and click on the map icon of Arizona, or you can come up here and click on the drop-down menu, and that will select Arizona. It even tells you, yeah, there are some states that don't have individual tax returns, so you don't have to worry about them. I don't worry about anybody except Arizona because I'm only trained on Arizona. And that brings us to this screen. The next screen after you click on Arizona is what type of return type are you doing? Resident, part year, or non-resident? Most everybody I do, well, everybody I do is resident. Occasionally, I have had a client come in and said, we moved here from Georgia. I used to live in Illinois, and now I live here. So that becomes a part year for the tax year. At that point, I can't help them because I haven't been trained on the other state. And that's something we need to tell our clients. Then it takes us to the Arizona tax return for the state. And this is the menu that you see. Basic information, additions, subtractions, deductions, credits, contributions, payments and penalties, scrolling on down. And we'll come back to that when we get to the Arizona credits and Arizona forms, because there's some peculiar things that we want to do for Arizona that's not covered in federal. The nice thing is when you got to this screen that says your federal return is complete and you add a state, when you click on this and add a state, the software takes everything from the federal return and it flows into the state return. So you don't have to do too much more typing unless there's something that we need to fix.
And something I would just kind of point out, your first experience with TaxSlayer is going to be in the practice lab doing these returns for your certification exams, and the states aren't enabled in the practice lab. So you won't need to worry about states until we actually get into doing a return, but we still want you to know how to use this.
And finally, after you've done the state return, it takes you to the summary print page. And this is what the summary print page looks like. So it'll actually show you a 1040 form for that client. and you can look through and see where all the information is put. And it will you even have the option to see page 1, or here's page 2. You could select it. And you can continue, you can come up here and you can click on view print return, and we'll do that in just a second to show you what it looks like. But the bottom line is you get to see everything, and if you want to print it, that's when you can print. But I'm going to suggest that the next step is you're going to click on the continue button over here, and it'll take you to the next screen. And I'm not going to, whoops, back up here. I think I'm going to leave this alone. There's no particular way or reason that you would need as a new volunteer or a tax preparer to input the information that you would actually need to print a return. Printing the return normally is a function of the quality reviewer or the site coordinator. And so there's a screen in here that I'm going to show you in a minute, but I'm not going to spend time telling you how to do it. Remember that office client list that we talked about? You could click on create a new tax return, or you could look at the office client list. When you click on office client list, this brings up the office clients. So here's Jeremy Clark and Gail Archer and Justin Beedley and York Young, and their phone numbers and their social security numbers, and who was the preparer and their status. We'll cover that in a minute. But there's a little print icon, and you can click on the printer. Or let's say that you were working on Jeremy Clark's return and you left it, you saved and exited, so it's still in progress. All you have to do is come over here and click on select, and it will then load Jeremy Clark's return so that you can continue working on it. After you have clicked continue from the summary print page, it takes you to the e-file section. And in the e-file section, you're going to click first down here. This doesn't show up real well, does it? Refund summary. And when you click on refund summary, it will then bring up a box that says, here's how much you're getting back, or here's how much you owe for the federal and for the state. And then over here, you can select from the drop-down menu the federal return type. And we always recommend e-file direct deposit. It could be e-file paper check. It could be mail copy, so that it's not e-filed, it's mailed in. But of course, then they won't see anything for months. Then the next page that comes up on the e-file page is the cost. But for VITA, it's a 0. It's always nice to show the client that there's no cost for all of this. Then we get to the taxpayer bank account information, and this is where it gets tricky. You have to be very careful with this. Double and triple check the bank account information. When in the old days, when I had a client sitting next to me, I would say, look at, as I'm typing this, make sure that the number I type in is the number for your account. If you get a refund and we're one number off, somebody else got your refund. And it'll be a problem for you, the bank, and the IRS, but I'm not involved. So let's make sure this is accurate. We even go to the point at some sites where when we give the client back their tax return and we ask them to sign for permission to file electronically, and we tell them that this is their return and they're responsible for it, we actually have them initial where the routing number and bank account number are located, so that we have one more piece of evidence on their return that they've looked at this and yes, it's the account number that they have. So we want to be very careful with this. Then you're going to wind up with some consent questions. And that depends on which program you're in, what you've got for your site. But there's questions that are in drop-down menus, and you input all the answers. Most of those are used to help prepare the site, or to help the site prepare to apply for a grant from the IRS the following year. to say how many people what percent of the population that they dealt with that could read and write English well versus not read and write English well. So these are kinds of things that are survey questions. Then you get to this third-party designee info. We don't use that. We just click next and move on. The state ID is optional. We don't use that. We just click next and move on. And finally, we're at the last page. We're almost done, the submission page. And so this is the last screen before we're ready to review. So you double check, make sure that those personal bank account name and number, routing number and account number are correct, and that we've got everything set. And at the bottom of the page is the magic button. There's two of them, is complete and ready for review. The ready for review is where you would click if you have completed inputting the information into the software. And that lets the software then distributes it and shows that the client is now ready for a quality review. The quality reviewer will mark this one is complete when they have finished. And when both are marked off, then it's ready to be transmitted by the site coordinator. Now, depending on the site, you might have some of these return tags. So in this particular site, they've got a return tag. They want, if it's clicked here, they want the person's return to be deleted by the site coordinator. Maybe they're waiting for a signature. Maybe it is ready to e-file. That's just one of the samples. But once if you have to mark a tag, then you would mark it there. You've already marked ready for review. You've marked a tag, and then you come down here and you click save and exit return, and you're done. Now here's another sample of return tags. This is a different site. They have more tags. It could be a 140 property tax credit only. That's for Arizona. Here's a do not transmit button. Whoa, something's there. Here's a reject, retransmitted, accepted, a paper return, the reject, the client was contacted. Here's Arizona unemployment hold awaiting legislation. We used that for about 4 weeks last year when Arizona was still taxing unemployment while the federal government wasn't. So these can change from site to site, depends on what your site coordinator has. One site I was at, they had all the dates the site was open. So you had to click what date it was that you did the return. And that way they could go back and sort through the returns by dates. But once you're done marking a return tag, and some sites require you to mark a return tag and some sites don't. That's one of the things you'll just have to ask your site coordinator. But then finally, you come down and you mark save and exit the return, and you're finished with the return. So that's kind of a trip through TaxSlayer practice lab. And it's also a trip through every return that you're going to prepare, because they're all the same. Under the finishing return part, this is a couple of little things just to point out. There's a tag and there's a status. And we talked about tags just a minute ago. We showed you the screens for those. But the status is something that you can see in the client office setup. So back there in the client list, the status shows in progress. It might show ready for review. It might show transmitted. It might show rejected. For you and me, most of the time, we're going to either see in progress or we're going to see ready for review. Sometimes we'll see completed if we're like, for some reason, we decide to go back in and look later in the day and to check on a particular client where some issue came up. The other thing we want to cover is notes, and that's those little icons that are kind of grayed out there next to the printer. And if that note shows up in black rather than gray, that means there's been a note attached to the taxpayer's return. Notes are a way for us to explain to other people who are going to look at the return information about that return. And here again, we've talked about if it's rejected, we need to fix that within 24 to 48 hours. And that's normally done by the site coordinator. Although sometimes the site coordinator will ask you as the return preparer, hey, this was rejected and here's the issue. Can you tell me about it? And so you'll be involved. On this screen, you can see up there at the top, the name of the client was Abigail Adams. And in that drop-down arrow, you get a note. And you can type the title. We normally say start with TY 2021 and then some title like property PTC, property tax credit, or whatever the title you come up with. And then you write in the box below it, you write the text of the note. And you'll see the result in the yellow box or whatever color you want to choose from the color palette down below. Since I'm colorblind, it doesn't really matter too much to me what color you choose.
Gene, can I jump in with just one thing? And most of our partners have got to this because the importance of titling that note TY 2021 or TY 2020 is because the notes carry over into the next year return. And if you just put in needs information, right? And so and you say, oh, the taxpayer is coming back with information for the school tax credit. Well, if that was for 2020, we may confuse that and think, oh, we're still waiting on that for 2021. So we try to define what tax year it is in the note. So.
Very good. And one of the things that we see the most often is the Arizona property tax credit. And a client will have, they'll need to know their parcel number for the property taxes. And sometimes they remember to bring their property tax bill with their parcel number on it. So almost all the time now, I've gotten in the habit of, I type in 2021 in the title, and then I put PTC, property tax credit. And then in the text, I put the parcel number is, and I type in the parcel number. So that next year, when the client comes back in, if they've forgotten to bring their parcel number and the preparer has opened up the software, it's going to say, the software will show them, you have some basic information from the prior year. Would you like to reload it? And the answer is yes, we don't want to type everything over again. And so it reloads and that note is reloaded. And so even if the taxpayer, the client, forgot their parcel number, we've got it in the software. Okay, we might as well do our first return, and it's 11:35. And I don't think we can do our first return. Jim, do you want me to spend a couple minutes with 4012 and we'll do that Control F function?
Sure. And then we can pick up after lunch with income with the session 2 then, right?
Okay, great.
Okay, good.
So I lowered the screen a little bit. Last time I opened up something, I couldn't see all of this. Here's the nice thing about this. Up here, it shows the 4012, the title, page 1 of 326. Holy mackerel, that's a lot of stuff to look through. As much as I like the handbook, the 4012 in paper with me at the site where I'm working with a client, sometimes it helps for me to show the client, yes, I'm looking through the book, but it's also takes up time to try and find which tab it was in. So I like to click here and go down to table of contents. And now I have a table of contents over here. And so now I can click on who must file, and it'll take me right to who must file, or legislative extenders, or, oh, did you forget we talked about scope of service? And someone asked, will we get a list of the scope of service? It's right here in the front of the 4012. So if I click on scope of service, it loads that page. Let me make it a little bit bigger here so we can hopefully see more. Okay. So Form 1040, virtual currency question. In scope, yes. In scope if taxpayers can check the no box. Taxpayers check no if they held no virtual currency for the tax year, or the taxpayer's only transactions involving virtual currency during the tax year were purchases of virtual currency with real currency. We don't do virtual currency. It's so new, the IRS won't even let us touch it. So even though it says, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, and this really is confusing because you first look at the virtual currency question, is it in scope? Yes, but then you read the detail and it's only in scope if they answer no. So, okay, now, and that is confusing. And even this whole list, even though it's very complete and all that, it goes by form, and you may not know. Most of the partners, and including City of Phoenix, I'm sure, they give you a much more condensed list that is very clear. Can you do virtual currency? Out of scope. Rentals? Out of scope. Depreciation? Out of scope. Business loss? Out of scope. It's much easier to read. So your partner will give you a much easier read. But if there was something really offhand that you weren't sure, then you could go look in this sheet here.
Right. And the next page, I think it's the wage, and here's the form W-2. So on a W-2, it's not in scope for box 12 codes, Q and RT and FF and W, advanced certification required. Well, code W refers to health savings accounts. If you see a W in box 12 on a W-2, you would know that that person has a health savings account. That's in scope for us if we have advanced certification. If we don't have it, if we have basic certification, we can't do it. If it's Q, military certification required. If it's an R or T, we can't do it. So this is the list, complete list that's put out by the IRS. This is their parameters saying this is what's in scope for if you're working with a VITA program. Now, the City of Phoenix, as a partner with the IRS, may limit that scope even more. They may say, we're not going to do this. I was looking for married filing separately. There are some sites that will do married filing separately under certain circumstances. The City of Phoenix has said, we don't do it. In other words, they've made it even more restricted. They won't do business expenses over $35,000. They're not going to do farm income. I don't know if anybody does farm income in the City of Phoenix, probably because there's no farms. But if somebody came in and said, yeah, I own a farm out in the sticks someplace in the rural areas of Arizona, we would have to say, I'm sorry, we can't do your return. You're out of scope. So that's your 4012, looking down the table of contents. This legislative extenders section. Excuse me, let me get over here to the right spot. We'll talk about things that have been extended in the tax law, and it will give you information about it. So what I like is tab A, who must file. Always takes a minute to load the first couple of pages, and then we need to resize it a little bit. Now this is helpful information. Now I got, if your filing status is single and you were under 65 and your return of your gross income was at least $12,550, I have to file. What's the $12,550? Well, that's the standard deduction. So if your gross income exceeds the standard deduction, that means you're going to have some taxable income. If I was married filing jointly and under 65, both spouses, then my filing status, I wouldn't have to file if it was not required if I didn't have at least $25,100 in gross income. This is a real informative chart. However, there's stuff down here at the bottom of the chart in the footnotes. You need to read that. I think in my book, I have a couple of them underlined because they provide additional information. When we get to dependents, we're going to ask you how to determine who's the dependent. And there's a, let's see, overview for rules. This is great. This is something we use a lot every day when we're with a client to make sure that we determine which person is a dependent on their tax return. Again, the footnotes at the bottom contain some exceptions. There's tiebreaker rules, all covered. This is all in your 4012. So you just flip to it. I love this chart. Step 1, can you or your spouse be claimed as a dependent? If yes, you may not claim anyone else as your dependent. But if the answer to that question is no, you go to step 2. If the answer is yes, you go to step 3. If the answer to question 3 is yes, you can't claim, and if it's no, you can go to step 4. So this guides you right down the decision making. But that's not the only kind of decision making there is. Here's another one for qualifying relative. Step 1, answer yes or no. Share with you some examples. The nice thing here is, here's your, under tab B, starting a return and filing status. You want to see what a 1040 looks like for the year 2021? It's right here in your book. This shows you the front page. Then it shows you the second page. I don't know if it shows you the schedules. Oh, it does tell you which schedules there are and where the schedules are referring to, which tabs in your 4012. And then here is the intake, interview, and quality review sheet. So when we start talking after lunch about the intake, interview, and quality review sheet, we'll show you screens, but here it is again in your 4012 with information about each of the items that every client fills out when they come to a VITA site. And it's not the first page, it's also the second page and the third page. So these are all answered for you as you go along. And then it takes you to starting a new return. Doesn't this screen look familiar? This is what's printed in the book, but it looks exactly like the screen that you would see in TaxSlayer Practice Lab so that you can see how to start the return. Notice I said that there was imported information from prior year. Here's your prior year data found. This is a great tool. We didn't have this 5 years ago. We had to start everything over, but now they have what's called global carry forward. And if the client agrees to global carry forward, some of that basic information about the client, their name, social security number, address, phone number, it's kept in the TaxSlayer servers. And when we start typing, it pops it back up and says, would you like to see that? And if we respond yes, then it brings that information forward and I don't have to retype everything. Now, the tricky part is, what if they moved? You know, you have to go back in and fix the old address with the new address, et cetera. So that's one of the things that we want to double check. And oh, you're right, Jim. Determination of filing status. Here's the decision tree. So here you start in this corner. Were you married on the last day of the year? Everything's important for the last day of the year. That determines so many things. How old you were on the last day of the year. Were you married on the last day of the year? So December 31st is an important date. If it's yes, you move on over here. If it's yes to that question, you move on down to here. And notice it says here, do all of the following apply? So if 3 of them apply, but not the 4th one, then you got a no and you come over here. But if it's a yes, then you come down here to head of household. So it's a decision tree. It makes it more understandable for how you would determine filing status. All right, I've talked up to about 15 till 12. Is there anything else we should cover on the 4012, Jim?
Yeah,
I
how
should,
to use Control F to find something?
yeah, shoot, I forgot all about that. Okay, so let's say I want to check, let's see. When I come up here and there's a search bar, and if I click search, and then I want to type in a phrase, let's say it's um, deductions, deductions. How come it didn't show up? Do you see what's happening? As I typed it in, it started finding every item in the book. And all I have to do is hit return, and it moves me to the next item. So I can search the book really quickly. Get my screen back over here on the page. It seems to want to move over, doesn't it? So you could do that. You could search for dependents. You could search for credits. You could search for education. You could search for rental property. You could, anything you type in there, that makes it so much easier to find rather than looking through the tabs and trying to go, okay, a deduction is standard or itemized deductions, and that's in tab, is it I or J? No, J is education. So you can use that search function when you have the 4012 on your desktop as an electronic file. Okay, I'm gonna, let's see, get out of deductions. Adjustments, deductions, non-refundable credits, other taxes, payments, and refundable credits, earned income credit. That's our important one for our clients, our education benefits, finishing the return, residents and non-resident aliens, other returns. I don't really worry about tab N using Taxpayer Pro Desktop, partner resources, and the glossary. But I love this table of contents. This is so great. And notice that they've always got at the front, they've always got, and remind us, these are our quality site requirements.
And you might show how that table of contents expands as you click on the little caret to the left. Like tab B, no, over in the table of contents. Go all the way to the left.
Yeah, let's do tab C here.
There you go.
Click on that and notice how tab C dependents now gives you, these are all the various pages that they've got in there, so that you can then go, okay, I need to do a qualifying relative. Click on that and it takes you right to that page. So that is a really user-friendly feature of the search box in publication 4012. I found recently, I was looking in, it was Pub 17, which is kind of the IRS version of the Holy Bible. And it's written so that it's really understandable by tax lawyers. But I wound up doing a search, an electronic search, and it went through the pub, and every time I hit the return button or the enter button, it found that term again. And so it was real easy for me to search through something that I don't like to read. I'd much rather find it in the 4012. Okay, Jim, how are we doing?
It's 10 minutes till 12. So I think it's probably a good time to break for lunch, but I would like to start back at 10 till 1 because session 2 has a little bit more complicated information in it.
All right, we'll see you people back here at 12:50.